So I wanted to play another BoW build, and since I'm not experienced with BoWs and I only played BoW build like 2 times in the last 3 years, I thought I'm gonna do ignites so that I would have an excuse for making, well, a bad build. Because everyone should know that ignites are kind of bad. They used to be very strong, but they got nerfed since the Harbinger League, and since then no one is playing with ignites. However, I was surprised that I'm actually able to deal, well, as much damage as I'm dealing. And in the end the clear speed was really decent. However, I'm gonna save you some time. Single target is still pretty bad. And I'm pushing this build almost to the limit. I invested like 4 exalts, which is not that much, but still. With that kind of investment you would expect to be able to deal with like at least, well, tier 4 elder. But I had so much problem dealing with tier 4 elder that I thought I'm not even gonna be able to do it. But in the end I somehow managed to do it. Actually, Uberizar was easier than tier 4 elder. Even tier 10 maps were easier than tier 4 elder. So this build can be pretty decent for map clear. And it's pretty nice for, well, weaker single target, and maybe you could push it to the like tier 15 maps, but it's not going to be the most pleasant experience. However, despite all the drawbacks that I named, for me this build was still very fun to play, because it gave that old school feeling of ignites. And if you are a newer player and never experienced the ignites before their nerf, then this build may interest you. And also, remember that older video where I talked about getting 100% reduced movement speed on enemies? Well, this is also a proof of concept. In a couple of these clips you will see that I'm able to fully slow enemy to the full stop. It just stops moving. It seems like it stops all the animation. But that is only because it has 100% reduced movement speed and it is stuck in the movement animation with 0% movement speed. However, if they get in range, they can still attack you, or cast spells, or attack with range attacks, or use something like Leap Slam, Flicker Strike. So it has a limited viability. It is mostly for melee enemies. And this is not maximizing this effect. This is mostly ignites with burning round, and on top of that having this slow. But it is possible to have more reliable slows, well, without the ignites I guess. But this will mostly work just for burning arrow. I'll explain everything, but it will take some time because there's a lot to talk about. But like always, I will add timestamps in video description, along with other information about this build. First, let me explain about mechanics. You can stack ignites up to 4 ignites, with 2 Emberwake rings and sudden ignition jewel, and I was using them until like level 80. Now the problem with Emberwake that it is increasing the ignite duration but reducing the ignite damage per second. It still deals the same damage over the duration, but it does deal less damage per second. The counter for that is Dyadian Dawn belt, which increases the ignite damage per second but reduces the ignite duration, and it is a huge damage multiplier for ignite damage per second. By the way, the base ignite duration is 4 seconds. Now, the Xoph Nurture BoW is not the only option to do ignite build like this. It is also possible to do a build like this with the Tempest BoW, which is pure lighting and then using Stormfire so that your lighting damage can ignite. That means all of your lighting damage will be used for ignite calculation. However, it's not going to be as good for burning ground, and you would not get a free ignite proliferation, and you would lose the heal from the ignites. So for that reason I chose Xoph Nurture BoW, and in the end I'm stacking 2 ignites and burning ground from Pitch Darkness, Threshold Jewel for burning arrow, and I have 3 of them. That means in the end I have 30% chance to spread burning ground when I ignite an enemy, and 30% chance to spread tar if I do not ignite an enemy. I'm gonna talk about tar later. So how do you scale burning ground damage? First of all, it scales with burning arrow level. It also scales with elemental damage with attack skills, fire damage, burning damage, damage over time, but not projectile damage or anything that says specifically with BoWs. So attack damage with BoWs would not affect burning ground. Also, burning ground is not an ailment, and it has about 3-second duration and does not scale with increased skill effect duration from the passive skill tree, Swift Affliction, or increased skill effect duration support gem. It does not. I did testing. Now, ignite scales in a very similar way. Ignite scales with elemental damage, fire damage, elemental damage with attacks, damage over time, and ailment damage, and burning damage. But ignites do not scale with attack damage or projectile damage. So I chose my passive skill tree according to that so that it would affect both ignites and burning ground. But support gems mostly affect ignites, simply because I can stack 2 ignites and in the end my ignites damage deal more damage than burning ground. Next, quickly let's talk about the tar. The tar is that black ground effect that slows enemies by 50%, well 50% reduced movement speed for enemies, and it stacks additively with maim, hinder, or other effects that only reduce enemies movement speed. So it is pretty easy to stack over 100% reduced movement speed for enemies. But anything that increases enemies movement speed will basically counter your reduced movement speed for enemies. So any map mod that gives movement speed for enemies cannot be slowed below base movement speed, or like frenzy charges, well, all those shenanigans will counter your reduced movement speed for enemies. So it is not very reliable, and it is only for movement speed. But it is still pretty cool defense mechanic, and for that reason I did not want to have very high chance to ignite, because I only spread tar when I do not ignite an enemy with burning arrow. So here's what I have to fully slow the enemy. I have the tar which gives 50% reduced movement speed, then I do have a hinder from aspect of the spider which gives 30% reduced movement speed, so that is already 80%, and on the quiver I have some chance to maim enemies on hit, and maim gives another 30% reduced movement speed, so I have over 100% reduced movement speed for enemies. And if you're playing less memeish build, you could use maim support gem, which would give more chance to maim and, well, slow enemies down. Oh, and also since I'm Scion Chieftain, I also have chance to cover enemies in ash. And when enemies get covered in ash, we take more fire damage and have another 20% reduced movement speed. Now, before all that information escapes your mind, let's quickly talk about this build. First, items. Xoph Nurture Bow, like I said, the main item, because it converts 50% physical damage into fire, and Burning Arrow converts another 50%, so you get full conversion into fire. And that means stronger ignites, because ignites are based on your fire damage. Also, it gives chance to ignite and recover life when you ignite an enemy, which works wonders against big enemy packs. And also, it basically has an inbuilt ignite proliferation. Belt, Dyadian Dawn, as I said already, ignite damage. Gloves, Fenumus Weave, because aspect of this spider is just so good, and it is like triple dipping on your damage because it increases your initial hit damage, then you get more damage from the aspect itself, and then more ailment damage. Ring, one of them is the Taming ring, which is pretty expensive, about 2.5 exalts in this league, but it does give quite a lot of damage and chance to ignite, shock and freeze. But until level 80, like I said, I was using 2 Emberwake rings. Stormfire on this could also be an option with some changes, or just opal rings like this one with a lot of well, elemental damage to attacks, added flat fire damage to attacks. So the Taming could definitely be replaced with just good opal ring. And opal rings are pretty cheap right now, but they are usually pretty expensive at the start of the league. Amulet also for damage, just a lot of elemental damage with attacks which I had, with also added flat fire damage to attacks. For the armor I bought 6 link corrupted armor with decent rolls and specific colored sockets. And corrupted armor like this are usually pretty cheap, at least in this league. I think I paid about 40 chaos. As for the quiver, well, you don't need maim, but you do need elemental damage with attacks. Both attacks fire an additional arrow, either as a, I believe, shaper mod or as a corrupted mod. And there is just, well, to fill the other stuff like life resistances. I think I paid like 1 exalt for this quiver, but mostly just because I wanted maim. Now, the helmet is totally optional because I just wanted something to increase my single target a bit more. So I'm using this helmet for, well, I guess that's good transition to talk about skills and links. So I'm using this helmet for my Blast Rain, which is linked with ranged attack totems, fire penetration, and elemental damage with attacks. And also the helmet gives Immolate and concentrated effect. Now on the main setup inside my armor I have Burning Arrow, Immolate level 20 quality 20 just to maximize, and Immolate actually gives a lot more damage for ignites on the second ignite, because the first ignite will not get affected with Immolate and the second ignite will be much stronger, which is also by the way not affecting Burning Ground. Then elemental damage with attack support, which is also affecting Burning Ground, then burning damage support, which also affects ignites and Burning Ground, Swift Affliction, which supports both again, and Deadly Ailments, which only affects ignites. Then in my gloves I have Herald of Ash with quality, clarity, enlighten, and flammability, which I cast manually. Enlighten does not affect aspect of the spider mana reservation. In my boots I have level 1 casting damage taken with level 8 firestorm, chance to ignite, and blind. Now this bow heals you because of the bow, which says that you recover life each time you ignite an enemy, and also helps blind enemy, making them have less accuracy. I was also experimenting with cast when damage taken and Frost Wall, and I would probably still be using, but I don't really have a sockets for that. Also for a single target I did try using Scorching Ray Totem, but it still didn't feel good enough. And for now, Blast Rain Totem does leech life to me because of Chieftain Ascendancy, and also helps cover enemy in Ash, slowing them down and making them take more fire damage. I do get that on my own attacks, but it's just to increase the chances of doing that. I also did try using Wild Burning Arrow, but I personally didn't like it, and it is probably better just for straight up damage, and it doesn't actually give all that much more ignite damage. Now for my passive skill tree, while leveling I was using volley and I did not have +1 to arrow quiver, so I first took Chieftain Sub-Ascendancy and then Deadeye. Deadeye gives increased accuracy, which you kind of need but you don't need all that much. Then you get Pierce for free to additional targets. You don't take more bleeding damage while moving, and your skills fire an additional projectile. Combine that with +1 to arrow quiver and you get 3 projectiles for free without using volley, LMP or GMP. And you get Pierce, which is very important. Now later I did refund from Chieftain into Elementalist because I was trying to play with shocks, didn't like it, then refunded from Elementalist into Guardian because of well, decent heals and protection from curses I guess, but in the end refunded back into Chieftain again. So I did regret a lot making this build, totally pun intended. Next, on the passive skill tree you need 4 jewel sockets that could support Dexterity Threshold Jewel, 3 for Pitch Darkness and 1 for Sudden Ignition, and the rest is just getting life and damage, and going towards Elemental Overload, which kind of isn't very reliable, because you need to crit to proc it and you don't have a lot of crit. I guess you could use Orb of Storms of course on hit and Flammability to trigger Elemental Overload and Curse. Now mana was a bit of an issue, so I had this Watcher's Eye from my previous build. It basically solves my mana problems. Also on other jewels it would be nice to get more chance to ignite, or just get life, well flat life with fire damage to attacks and fire damage to both attacks. I also specifically traveled towards the Blood Drinker because I wanted well some leech from attacks. But since I'm scaling mostly my damage over time, so I'm not actually getting all that much leech, but it does help a bit. So my final conclusion, in the end I think they are sort of viable, I mean ignites, but well I did manage to do the Phoenix with very easy map mods, but it did take like 4 deaths. So I can't say that it is completely bad, but it's also not very endgame viable. Of course I'm only level 84, so with a couple more levels and couple more improvements it should get more damage. One more thing, it is very likely that next league we gonna get some ignite buffs or even overall damage over time buffs, so this build may actually become very good in the next league. I did enjoy this build, but it's time to end it. I really want to start my next build because I have been waiting for Ball Lighting MTX for so long and we finally got it, and it is amazing. So for the next build I will be doing Ball Lighting but with maximum amount of chill effect. It's gonna be great, or not. And that's all, thank you for watching and see you soon.